Hey there, and welcome back. You know we like to dive deep on this show, and today it's all about T-Mobile, cybersecurity, and what their recent troubles mean for you. Because let's face it, a $31.5 million settlement from the FCC isn't just a headline, it's a wake-up call for everyone who uses a phone, which is, well, pretty much everyone. Think about it. Our phones hold everything these days, not just contact lists, but banking info, photos, even our whereabouts.
It's enough to make anyone a little nervous, right?
And what's even more concerning is that the FCC settlement covers four separate data breaches at T-Mobile between 2021 and 2023. This wasn't just one oversight, it points to some potentially deep-seated security issues. But what I find really interesting is what happens now. Sure, T-Mobile's paying a hefty fine, but the FCC is also requiring them to make some major changes to their security practices. They've laid out 6 key commitments, and honestly, they provide a fascinating glimpse into how cybersecurity is evolving across the entire industry.
What's fascinating about this is that the FCC isn't simply accepting a payment and moving on. They've created a dedicated task force to address data breaches, signaling a far more assertive stance on cybersecurity within the telecom industry. It's a clear message, not just to T-Mobile, but to all the major players.
And they're putting their money where their mouth is, so to speak. AT&T and Verizon have also faced scrutiny in settlements for data security issues. This isn't about a single company being bad, it's a systemic challenge. So let's unpack these 6 commitments because they're not just technical jargon. They're designed to make it significantly harder for hackers to access your data. For example, one of the most crucial changes is the move towards a zero-trust architecture.
Now, this might seem like a highly technical term, but it's actually a pretty simple concept at its core. Essentially, with zero trust, T-Mobile can no longer assume that any user or device on its network is automatically trustworthy. That means even if it appears to be an employee logging in from a company device, every single connection has to be verified and authorized at every step of the way. Think of it as having multiple layers of security checks, even for people who seem like they should have access. This makes it much harder for unauthorized users to slip through the cracks.
Right. It's a bit like assuming everyone, even someone who flashes a familiar ID card, might have bad intentions. You don't just let them waltz into the control room.
Yeah.
You're constantly verifying, double-checking, never just assuming good faith. And it's not just about who gets in, it's about what they can access even if they do.
Right.
That's where another one of these commitments comes in. Multi-factor authentication, you've probably seen this already. It's that extra step where you get a code texted to your phone, or you have to approve a login attempt through an app. It's becoming standard practice for banking, email, even social media, because that one extra step makes a huge difference.
Exactly. It might seem like a hassle, but it creates a significant barrier for hackers. Even if someone manages to steal your password, they're still locked out unless they also have your phone or access to your authentication app. It's like a deadbolt on your front door. Even with the key, it's a whole lot harder to break in.
And this isn't just about T-Mobile catching up after the fact. The FCC's actions, especially with that dedicated task force, signal a real shift in the industry.
Absolutely, and we're seeing it with the settlements against AT&T and Verizon too.
Hmm.
It's becoming clear that the FCC is setting a new standard, one where cybersecurity is non-negotiable. They're basically saying, if you want to play in this space, you have to up your game and protect consumer data.
It's like the Wild West of data security's finally getting some sheriffs in town. And here's why that matters. In April 2024, the FCC issued substantial fines to all major carriers for sharing customer location data without proper consent. This demonstrates their commitment to consumer privacy extends beyond just data breaches. It shows they're looking at the bigger picture of how companies are using and potentially misusing our data.
This is where it gets really interesting because it goes beyond just reacting to breaches. This is about pushing the entire industry towards a more proactive approach to security.
Right, and these hefty fines, like the $31.5 million for T-Mobile, are a powerful motivator. Suddenly, investing in robust cybersecurity isn't just a nice-to-have, it's a business imperative. The cost of a breach, both financially and in terms of reputation, is simply too high to ignore.
It's a bit like the insurance industry. The riskier you are, the more you pay.
Exactly, and that's a good thing because it incentivizes companies to prioritize security from the ground up. We're seeing a shift where companies are beginning to understand that a security-first culture isn't just good ethics, it's good business.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, it's not a one-time fix. Technology is always advancing, and hackers are constantly finding new ways to exploit vulnerabilities. It's a constant arms race, really. And that's why T-Mobile's 6 commitments are so important. They're not just about fixing the specific issues that led to these breaches. They're about establishing a security-first culture, a foundation for continuous improvement.
Absolutely, because we as consumers are increasingly relying on these companies to protect our data.
It's like the old saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It's far better to invest in robust security up front than to deal with the fallout of a major breach later.
Precisely, and that's the message the FCC is sending loud and clear.
So we've covered the T-Mobile breaches, the FCC's response, and the broader industry trends. But let's bring this back to you, the listener, because this isn't just a tech industry issue, it's something that affects all of us.
Exactly. Every time you use your phone, every website you visit, every
Mhm.
online transaction you make, it all generates data. And that data is valuable, both to legitimate companies and to criminals.
And as we've seen, even big companies like T-Mobile with significant resources can fall victim to data breaches. So what does that mean for the average person? What can WE do to protect ourselves?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's one that we should all be asking ourselves. First and foremost, we need to be aware of the risks. We can't bury our heads in the sand and assume that our data is safe just because we trust the companies we do business with.
Right, it's like locking your front door. You wouldn't leave it wide open just because you live in a safe neighborhood, right?
Exactly. And just like you take steps to protect your physical property, you need to take steps to protect your digital information as well.
So what are some practical things people can do? Give us the rundown.
Well, first and foremost, strong passwords are a must. And don't use the same password for multiple accounts. That's like using the same key for your house, your car, and your office. And whenever possible, enable multi-factor authentication. It might seem like an extra step, but it can make a huge difference in protecting your accounts.
It's like that extra layer of security we talked about earlier. It might be a minor inconvenience, but it's worth it for the added peace of mind.
Absolutely. And be wary of phishing scams. Don't click on links in emails or text messages from senders you don't recognize, and be cautious about giving out personal information online.
It's amazing how convincing some of those phishing attempts can be these days. They're getting more sophisticated all the time.
They are, and that's why it's so important to be vigilant. Think before you click, and if something seems too good to be true, it probably is.
Good advice. And what about public Wi-Fi? I know a lot of people use it, but it always makes me a little nervous.
You're right to be cautious. Public Wi-Fi can be a security risk because it's often not encrypted, meaning that anyone on the same network could potentially intercept your data.
Yikes, that's not good.
So, if you must use public Wi-Fi, try to avoid accessing sensitive information like your bank account or credit card details.
And maybe use a VPN. I've heard that can help.
A VPN, or virtual private network, can add an extra layer of security by encrypting your internet traffic, making it much harder for hackers to snoop on your online activity.
So it's like putting your data in a secret envelope before sending it out into the world of the internet.
Exactly. And the good news is that there are many reputable VPN services available, often for a reasonable monthly fee.
So strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, being wary of phishing scams, being cautious on public Wi-Fi, and considering a VPN, that's a pretty good starting point for anyone looking to improve their online security.
It is. And the most important thing is to be proactive. Don't wait until you're a victim of a data breach to start taking your online security seriously.
Because once that data is out there, it's out there. There's no putting the genie back in the bottle.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to stay informed, stay vigilant, and stay one step ahead of the bad guys.
So it's a bit of a digital Wild West out there, but we're not powerless. We can take steps to protect ourselves and our data.
Absolutely. And the more informed we are as consumers, the more pressure we can put on companies to make cybersecurity a top priority.
It's like anything else, companies respond to incentives. If we demand better security, they'll be more likely to deliver it.
Exactly. And that's why cases like the T-Mobile breaches are so important. They shine a spotlight on the issue and force us to have these conversations.
They make us realize that cybersecurity isn't just an abstract concept or a problem for tech people to solve. It's something that affects all of us in our daily lives.
Precisely. And the more we talk about it, the more aware we become, and the better equipped we'll be to protect ourselves.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from the specifics of the T-Mobile breaches to the broader implications for data security in the digital age. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with something to chew on, something that goes beyond just the practical tips we've discussed. Think about all the different companies and organizations you interact with online, from your bank to your favorite social media platform to your healthcare provider. Now, here's the question. Do you know how seriously each of those entities takes data security? Have you ever checked their privacy policies? Do they have a good track record? Have they ever been breached? These are questions we should all be asking ourselves. Because in today's world, knowledge is power, and the more informed we are as consumers, the better choices we can make about who we trust with our data.
It's about taking ownership of your digital footprint. Don't just assume that your data is safe. Do your research, ask questions, and demand better from the companies you do business with.
Exactly, because ultimately it's our data, it's our privacy, and it's our responsibility to protect it. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Hopefully, you found it informative, insightful, and maybe even a little bit empowering. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and stay safe out there in the digital world.